Mercedes won the first ever German Grand Prix in 1926, and some will tell you that the Mercedes-McLaren package is ideally suited to this new circuit. We have our own package that's ideally suited to the circuit, of course, in John Watson and Ben Edwards. Only one question, Ben. Which one of you is the engine and which one is the chassis?
Well, I think in the traditions of the best Formula One cars nowadays, we are the totally integrated package, blending the engine and chassis together so you can't make a distinction between us. Well, that's what we hope anyway, something like that, John. It's been fun this morning already. We're just looking on the screens at the moment. I see there's still a chance of rain coming up, but hopefully it will stay dry and the teams can continue this development process of learning the new track.
And it's certainly been very interesting to see how different teams have approached the problems of the Hockenheim ring for the first time. Ferrari obviously clearly very quick indeed, demoralisingly so. Really didn't get much chance to see Michael Schumacher with that increased downforce. He was on a lap, had a quick first sector, then he spun in that second sector in the hairpin bend. So we've got that to look forward to. And hopefully we'll see some of the Michelin runners pumping out maybe a lot of the fuel, in particular the Williams and Ralf Schumacher, who won here last year. So a lot to look forward to this 1 hour session coming up, and we'll maybe get a view of what may occur when we get into that qualifying session tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And the prospects of turn one being particularly exciting. I've marked that corner out already as one to keep an eye on, and also coming back into the stadium in through the Agip curb, where we've seen Felipe Massa, Giancarlo Fisichella and many others this morning running wide over the curb and getting a major tank slapper on, and fortunately keeping it in control. I fear that somebody might go too far and that car will swing out of control and end in the barrier on the right hand side of the track.
Well, we'll have to wait and see exactly what's going to happen. It certainly has been an interesting first free practice session. If you missed that first session, just joining in, well, welcome to our coverage from Hockenheim, where the long straights and chicanes that were such a feature of this racetrack for many, many years have now been removed. We still have one very high-speed section of the track that was still over 200 miles an hour heading down towards the new hairpin. Now, there's an interesting little conversation. Craig Pollock talking to Bernard Ferguson nearest the camera. Now, if Craig Pollock really is involved in the deal to take over Arrows, which is what a lot of people are talking about, of course, he's got to sort out his engine supply, and that's the man he would have to be talking to. Yes,
and Cosworth really not looking to supply engines on a short term. I mean, a one-year deal is not what they're interested in doing, because, of course, they've got to ramp up their manufacturing side. They've got to bring in more people to build the engines, maintain them. So, therefore, they're looking for a commitment, which would be ideally 3 years, but probably negotiated down to 2. Craig Pollock being mentioned in conjunction with the Arrows team, though again, rumour market. I mean, the Hockenheim paddock here is alive with rumours. The people involved, the backers, the rumoured backers that Craig had, are apparently somewhat less enchanted with Formula One as a result of what's been going on in Arrows, and they maybe aren't going to be there as strongly as was initially suggested. But of course it's all rumour and speculation, but it does make being in a paddock at a Grand Prix a lot of fun.
It does indeed, yes. Looking back over the previous winners here, Barrichello, the winner of his first ever Grand Prix, that was in 2000. Dry at the start, wet at the end. He stayed on dry weather tyres to came through to take an historic victory. Gerhard Berger, now of course boss at BMW Motorsport, but his last ever Grand Prix win came here back in 1997. In the days that he was driving for the Benetton team, it was his 10th and final Grand Prix win, and in fact at the time it was the first win for Benetton since Michael had left the team.
Yes, and I think from memory it came very shortly after the death of his father in a flying accident. A very traumatic, a very emotional period for Gerhard, and that weekend he was just absolutely alive all weekend, dominated entirely the events.
I was looking at the press release there that has been issued, announcing the fact that the driver lineup is, as expected, David Coulthard and Kimi Räikkönen, with Alexander Wurz again the third driver for the team, but interestingly an opportunity perhaps for him to actually get a race or two in during next season. So that's the interesting news from the McLaren Mercedes press conference. No surprises on the driver lineup. Of course, a number of drivers who are looking at new teams next year and putting in good performances this year, and one of those is Australian Mark Webber. Peter Windsor's had the opportunity to catch up to him.
Mark, we had you earlier in the show talking about next year, so we're not going to ask you any questions about that. But first impressions of the circuit?
They've made a huge change to the circuit. Obviously, the last circuit was long straights, chicanes, and a long way out the back there. Now it's still a power circuit. You need to have a very good car on the brakes and very good traction. some very slow corners, tight and twisty, demanding on the car, on the power. So it's okay. It's another track. It's a new challenge for it, which is good for us guys, you know, but could be better.
Is it the sort of circuit you take corner by corner, or do you need to get into a rhythm for the lap to do a time?
Well, the first part of the lap, all the corners are pretty much, they're quite away from each other. So you've got the first corner here, which is reasonably quick, very tight apex, and then it just opens up. Got to give the curb a lot of respect, and then quite bumpy on the brakes for 2. Then you've got the massive long run down to the next hairpin. Then you're out of there through 5. And the last part of the lap is, as we know, is the old circuit. So treat the stadium as one lot, really.
Let's talk about turn 1 for a little bit. How would you compare that with, say, Copse at Silverstone?
It's a lot slower than Copse because it's a bit narrower on the exit, so your exit speed has to be slower than what we have at somewhere like Copse, where Copse opens up a lot, and the actual apex of the corner is a lot tighter than somewhere like Copse, but it's nowhere near as challenging as Copse either. So.
But what about that runoff area on the outside? Have you tried using that yet, deliberately?
No, they've got a timing loop there anyway, so obviously if we go out there, we'll trigger the loop to say that we've ran wide, so that's good that they've got that there. Also, the curbs on a Friday, I don't think that'd be too clever for the car to get out there, and I think the curbs would be quite aggressive on the bottom of the car here.
And how's your car going specifically?
Not too bad. We were smoking around this morning on the hard tyre, so I think we get some good information on that, stacks of fuel, and we'll do the same again this afternoon. Alex is running with a different setup, different fuel, and trying to get some information for sort of tomorrow. So,
how smooth is the track surface? Are we talking manicure, Michelin territory here?
It's when these clouds lift over the next few days, I think it could come in our favour. I mean, we've seen early in a Grand Prix weekend when the track's quite dirty. It was very dirty initially this morning. It could suit the Bridgestone maybe a little bit more, but it could suit us very well. Is
it a billiard smooth surface?
Some places are quite bumpy, like exiting turn 7, coming up to turn 8 before coming into the stadium. Even though it's on the straight, but it's quite bumpy there, and also braking into turn 2 can be quite bumpy as well. So most of the track is quite smooth.
Good. Very good luck. Thank you.
See ya. See you, mate.
So a good detailed interview with Mark Webber. Gives us a lot more insight into this track, and certainly everybody getting a feel for it now. Coulthard mentioned those bumps as well, and Mark Webber certainly mentioning them in that interview with Peter.
Yeah, I thought it was quite amusing with David. He was very careful what he said, but he was referring to the Nürburgring, where the new extension into turn 1 there, smooth down to the braking zone. As soon as you hit the braking zone, it goes into a washboard, and everybody at Nürburgring complained about the entry to turn 1, how bumpy it was. And again, seeing here in entries into some of the corners again how bumpy it is. And well, maybe David's got a point. Maybe the tarmac at him in a straight line is fine, but suddenly under the braking zones somebody doesn't get quite rolling it out properly.
Well, the man who's made the changes to this track, of course, has done quite a lot of work on Formula 1 tracks in recent years, designed the Malaysia track as well. Hermann Tilke, he's an architect based in Germany, also did those revisions at the Nürburgring earlier on this season. And looking at the response that we're seeing from the drivers, and there from the email response from Ferrari, showing that modern circuits can be interesting. Of course, the problems with designing a track nowadays, or the main issue, is safety. That is the crucial issue. You have to allow enough runoff, you now have to allow very big safety margins, and that's always the trouble, to try and produce an interesting track and yet still retain the safety.
Well, I think it's a bit of a balance between it, because the safeties are given over every circuit, whether it be a modern circuit or a circuit that's been revised, such as Hockenheim, or an original circuit maybe like Monza or Spa-Francorchamps. But I think the other criteria which is very important today is from the television audience perspective, and also from the public. You know, the change in seating here, we've got 40,000 additional seats within the circuit. It's a much shorter circuit, 2.71 miles as opposed to just 4.25 miles, and we're getting more people in. That's bringing more money into the sport. They're getting to see a 67-lap Grand Prix as opposed to a 45-lap Grand Prix. And as far as the majority of the public are concerned, they weren't able to go down those very long high-speed straights, other than a few hundred that maybe gathered around one of the chicanes. So I think it's a win-win-win situation overall. Having said that, I think we need not to lose that sense of balance. We still need to retain circuits where you do have that in excess of 200 miles an hour straight, such as at Monza or at Indianapolis. And also you want laps where this, I mean, Monza's a short Grand Prix. Maybe one or two of them in the year is all we're going to see in the future.
Well, it's always interesting to see changes being made, alterations coming through, and the German Grand Prix over the years has been held at a number of different venues. Of course, the old Nürburgring was the main holder of the German Grand Prix for many, many years until Hockenheim really came on track, as you said earlier on, John, in 1977 for the after Lauda's accident at the Nürburgring.
Yes, and just talking about number of laps, I think from memory, the 1976 Grand Prix, the last to be held on the original Nordschleife Nürburgring circuit, was something like 12 laps. I mean, you've got to be joking. Imagine being stuck out at the Foxhole or Flugplatz or something. All you see is your hero coming past you 12 times. They never even did a full lap as a parade lap prior to going in the grid, because they used a little loop that brought you back behind the pits and back onto the grid. So
the spectators gaining a great deal from the track changes that have been made here, and we'll just have to see how the teams and drivers continue with their work on this second session of free practice. We're just a few minutes away from it getting underway. Juan Pablo Montoya was 6th fastest in the first session, 2nd fastest of the Michelin runners, and is 2nd in the championship table, remember, but is now involved in a tussle with Rubens Barrichello for that 2nd spot, and with the Mitre Ferrari now going perhaps towards the Brazilian a little more than in the earlier stages of the season. It could be quite a tussle between the two of them for 2nd. And don't forget, Ralf Schumacher's right in that battle as well.
Yeah, there's 4 drivers, all covered by about 4 points, and there's going to be one battle to the end of the season. Not that the teams necessarily are so interested in coming 2nd in the championship for the drivers. What they're concerned about is maximising the points for their own championship, because that does relate directly to their income stream.
Well, inside the Williams pit, Ralph's getting ready to come back out. Both cars ran successfully and put in a decent number of laps this morning. 1 or 2 didn't have such a good run. We heard from Coulthard earlier, they had a mechanical problem. The other one that went out dramatically with what looked like engine failure was Pedro de la Rosa. Peter Windsor's been able to catch up with him.
Pedro, could you talk us through the problem with your car this morning?
Well, it just had a engine blow up, and the mechanics are working right now, just trying to fix it, trying to replace the engine, and probably we'll get the last minutes of the session. But so far, apart from this, the car felt good.
We don't always keep in touch with problems you might have in testing. What is your feel about engine reliability this year from Cosworth?
It's very good, I must say. Engine, I mean, we were quite surprised about this problem, because we haven't had any blow-ups for a long time. So it's weird. They are investigating the problem, but I mean, nevertheless, we just try to get out as soon as possible.
First impressions of the circuit?
Well, it's I must say it's not that I don't like it. It's just that Hockenheim has lost completely the personality. You know, it used to have. The track itself is good, but you could be racing in Nürburgring, you could be racing in Malaysia, you could be racing anywhere else. You know, so it's okay, but it has lost the straights and the personality it used to have.
Do you think it will be a good circuit for Michelin in the same way as Manicourt?
We're not sure. We're not sure. At the moment, the top 10, there's only 2 Michelin runners, so we just have to see. The weather is quite cold today, so we know tomorrow it will be hotter, which will help. But I need to do more laps, really. We have learned nothing at the moment.
Okay, well, let's hope we get that engine in. You can get out there in good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, one genuinely nice guy as we look down the Constructors' Championship. But Pedro talking about the reliability of the Cosworth, or in his case, the Jaguar engine. I'm not quite sure Tom Walkinshaw would agree, having had 2 major, well, 1 blow-up certainly for Frentzen at Silverstone, and having other unreliability problems. Nevertheless, it's a pretty good little package, and that's what you have to think about. It is a package, not just an engine.
There he is, the 5 times world champion, and great response and reception from the crowd here. All the Schumacher hats, and you noticed he's wearing the new 5-star Schumacher hat, the 5 World Championships marked off, and I'm sure that'll be the latest hot-selling property here at Hockenheim in the stalls around the circuit. Everybody's celebrating the fact that this man has wrapped up the title earlier than anybody ever has done in the history of the World Championship. Not quite sure where he's off to at the moment before the session gets underway.
Well, he looks as if he's going down to the scrutineering hut. He may just be going down to check his weight. And I think that's probably what they're going to do. And he walks in, and let's see if he gets on the scales. And I think he does. There we are. Well, there's a pair of scales at each corner of that flatbed, which is used to check the car weights. So why Ferrari and Michael are going down at this point, it is an unofficial session. There's no change of car. There's no reason for any ballast change, unless Well, I suppose that maybe he might have sweated about 20 pounds or something in that first session, so they've got to reballast the car. Basically, if the ballast was right at the start of this session, surely they shouldn't have to do it, because they know the fuel they're putting in, they know the weight of Michael. He hasn't changed weight in the space of an hour. But attention to detail, I think, really is what that's all about. They don't want to carry any more weight than they need necessarily to do.
Well, Michael certainly doesn't really carry much more weight than he needs to do. And remember last year, in fact, when he went off and contested in the Karting World Championship, he actually managed to lose extra weight just for the sake of doing that, which was a pretty impressive effort. Now, down in the pits, the track has opened, and we're looking at preparations in the Sauber pit. Nick Heidfeld's getting ready. Michael making his way back down to the Ferrari pit before coming out. Second fastest overall at the moment, but had the fastest sector times, as we remember. And Barrichello ending up with the slightly faster lap time overall. Olivier Panis was third, just to remind you. Raikkonen fell fifth, then Montoya sixth. Massa was seventh. Sato was just ahead of his teammate Fisichella, eighth and ninth. Frentzen was 10th, ahead of McNish. And we're looking at Alan now on track. So Alan just a little bit quicker, some 4/10 faster than his teammate in that first 1 hour.
And there we've got a very good view of that Nord turn, the one that leads out of the stadium. And Alan's got so he did a good job. And you don't see a Formula 1 driver getting a car sideways like that and holding it on the steering and on the throttle. And McNish achieved that and got away with it.
Now we're into the Parabolica, this long, curving, flat-out section, which is a straight in terms of what the driver has to do, just a little bit of a curve, and no cornering to really worry about. And speed's getting up to over 200 miles an hour as they come down towards that hairpin, as we've seen this morning. Michael Schumacher had the highest top speed, although that was before they put an additional element on the rear wing. So those top speeds may change slightly over the course of the weekend as teams put more and more downforce on the cars.
Yes, but of course, sometimes putting that additional downforce on, what it does is it enables you to get on the putt. And Ralf Schumacher, second spin of the... Oh, that's again, I think that's in turn two. Yes, that's just turn two going into the new part of the circuit. But putting more downforce on depends how much it is, but it may enable you to get through a corner slightly quicker and therefore get onto the straight that much quicker. And it may not affect the top speeds as much as ordinarily people would imagine putting additional wing on.
Well, we're watching Kimi Raikkonen here. He is fourth fastest at the moment after this morning's session, and we'll see whether we're going to see any improvements. 1.3 seconds down. That's the right-hander that Mark Webber was telling us. It's a quickish corner, but not as daunting as Copse at Silverstone. This was Ralph's spin a moment ago.
So Schumacher comes up into this turn two, turns in. Previously, it was a front-end bite problem. Well, again, I think he might have been slightly off line. It's difficult to tell from that camera angle. We need to see an on-board one. Or somebody again, that's the corner coming into the stadium, the Ajip corner. That's the corner I think is going to be the real problematic corner over the period of the weekend.
David Coulthard on track now. He had problems earlier on. They've managed to solve the leak that was coming from a drive shaft, and they've got him on circuit. So now he's just trying to get himself a bit of clear space. He slows down before the final corner, nails it as he comes through, and now has an opportunity to put in a quick lap.
So Coulthard had done personal best in first and second sector until he came up upon the traffic. Backs off. Let's look at Juan Pablo Montoya replay. And this is who it... Whoa, 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 whoa! Now that is turn. That's the Ajip corner. The one I've been talking about, the one I think, look, he rides the curb, the back end. I mean, we've seen this happen to him in Manicourt. Patrick had put it down to the rear of the car bottoming. Well, it may have bottomed in this case because the front was riding the curb, so therefore the left rear would be quite low.
Well,
Kimi Raikkonen goes third.
Yes, third fastest. An improvement there for Kimi Raikkonen. Puts him ahead of Olivier Panis. And Coulthard is currently on track at 17.3 through the first sector. So Coulthard 0.3 slower through the first sector at the moment than Raikkonen. But of course, Raikkonen's done a good deal more laps so far here today. Watching Ralf Schumacher, winner at Hockenheim last year, but now just trying to get the car, and again, just a little bit wide, the same place that Montoya went much wider and went off the track.
I think it's just the extra speed, the extra grip tyres and the tarmac are providing, plus the downforce. And as Coulthard mentioned, the exit of the corners aren't open exits, they pinch back in. And carrying that extra speed means that you're running out too early to the exit of the corner and you have to pull the car back, or else it'll run wide, as Takuma Sato has done.
That's to the hairpin, John. He's come in there a little quick. We saw Michael Schumacher have a little spin here earlier on today. Sato does the complete 180 and has to turn back onto the track, but no dramas, and he rejoins once again. He was pretty much on his own there.
Yes, just a look and see what Takuma Sato does. Comes down, puts the brakes on, just feeling the car into the corner, and all of a sudden, oops, around she goes. He clips, gets the clutch on the, there you see his left hand on the clutch lever. This is the view, and again that sort of initial, he's turning in and the back end's already drifting away from him. Just floors the throttle, but then has to grab the clutch before the anti-stall device is activated. He actually gets his hand down, grabs the clutch.
Oh, and Alex Young, that is, who's stranded himself across the curb.
Turn 2.
Yeah, that's where Ralf Schumacher went off. Ralf managed to bounce backwards onto the extra tarmac.
So again, a yellow flag zone, and with marshals running to grab that car. Now outside assistance will mean that's going to be the end of the session for Alex Young, and he needed every lap of the 1 hour available today.
So Ralf Schumacher goes 7th fastest to 17.902, slight improvement for him. And David Coulthard, 1:18.704, 5th fastest for the moment, as we wait to see Alex Young and see whether they can actually manage to push that car. It's beached on the bottom there.
Turn it off, sorry.
And they can't get it back on.
Alex, cut the engine before you do any damage. Just cut the engine.
And now that he's been told to turn the engine off, because of course the engine's running, and it could easily overheat in that situation. No air going through the radiators, so they want to, in fact it's looking all a bit hot around the back of his car as it is, so best thing is switch it off, get out the car, and he's just going to have to sit out the rest of the session.
In fact, if the marshals had been able to get him back onto track or get out of the way somewhere safely, he would have been allowed to continue. But now that the engine's been cut and that's the session for Alex has concluded, and well, he'll be disappointed. But he's done 29 laps. He was on his 30th lap, so he's got a fair amount of mileage, and he can't claim that he didn't get to learn the circuit. But of course, well, pretty much matching. He's only a 1/10 of a second away also from Mark Webber. Mark's done 24 laps, so Young doing a good job, in fact, here on a new circuit to everybody, and not maybe feeling so disadvantaged as he may have done on some of the other circuits we've been to this year.
Well, he's pretty fed up with himself, isn't he? It looked like it was his mistake. He spun it just like Ralph did, but unlike Ralph, he ended up stranded on the curb. So unfortunate, perhaps didn't let it roll enough, got on the brakes when it let go, and then it just left him there.
Well, if Young can get his car stranded on the curbs, maybe that's an area we have to think about for the future, because it is not necessarily ideal to see a car sitting there, and well, we're going to need a tow truck to come and pull that car away. They cannot leave it there for the remaining part of the session. And there's more and more people there. The truck, or the dump, whatever you want to call it, with the crane. Actually, it looks like a John Deere or something of that ilk. Well, whatever it is. So they'll just lift the car completely off the curb, and it'll be pulled away to safety. But just highlights when the circuit's designed and curbs are being worked out, what's ideal, what's best, as we go to David Coulthard going slowly.
Yes, now what's all this about? David Coulthard going very slowly indeed. Was this just trying to find himself some space? He had gone up to 5th fastest, and looked as though things were running okay, but going a lot slower than we might have imagined. This was just coming down to the hairpin, so let's hope that he's just looking for space at the moment. He is back up to speed by the looks of things, and it doesn't look as though he's in any sort of mechanical difficulty as Young's car at last gets taken away to a place of safety.
So a little area teams will be aware of, warn their drivers to, if they are going to spin, floor it and try not to let the car get caught on that curb. If that happens in a race, you will be out of the race, no question.
So Michael Schumacher then, let's see what, oh, and we've got a Villeneuve spinning off this time, as he does a very neat couple of pirouettes.
Turn 2 as well.
Yeah, that's coming back into the stadium actually. That's where we saw Montoya running wide earlier.
Yes, I was looking at the wrong, there's 2 red lights up on our data screen, and that is the corner, the Ajib corner, which I've been banging on about all day, being the corner which is going to be the biggest issue. Again, rides the curb now. Watching it, oh, way out wide.
Yes, and then the back end of the car on the grass, no grip, and round she goes a couple of times.
Well, Villeneuve did the right thing here, because he didn't try to pinch the car, hold it in. He let it run out, and then he could sort the thing out once it got on the grass, rather than having it swing abruptly round to the right. But look, he goes all the way down to the Sachs curve before he comes to a standstill.
Yeah, it's a long way down, isn't it, into that stadium area. So Villeneuve's car is okay, I think. He'll probably come in to have it checked over, but he's not left stranded on the circuit. We're riding with Coulthard. Let's just sit back and watch this for a moment as he becomes more acclimatised. He's got some good sector times going here.
Improved in both first and second sector. Coulthard's got traffic ahead of him. He's got Nick Heidfeld in the Sauber. So David Coulthard, it's not going to affect his lap at this point, but depends whether Heidfeld goes into the pits. Yes, he does. Coulthard clear, but he will have been momentarily distracted. 1:17.851 is his best to date, 1:16.9, and David Coulthard goes third. As you see, Michael Schumacher spins now at turn 2. So turn 2, and the Agieb curb are proving to be the most problematic of all the corners around the revised Hockenheim ring.
Well, Coulthard.
Yes, Coulthard at turn 2 as well.
Yeah, same place as... well, let's see what happened to Michael first of all. He was coming down into the corner. This was where Jung spun earlier on. Round it goes. Ralph spun here as well. We're seeing a number. It's all happening at either turn 2 or turn 12 today.
And that looked fairly innocuous, didn't look like he was doing anything particular. And I wonder just now, is this something to do with the surface? Is there something going on down in turn 2? Or is it maybe just a build-up of rubber? But it wouldn't be on the racing line. I wonder, is this the surface with the grip that the cars are producing beginning to roll off the top surface a little bit?
Well, Coulthard is up to third fastest now. He's within the same second as the Ferrari. He's some 7/10 slower. Let's see what happened to him.
Well, there's Michael's tyre smoke. He just literally left the scene of the crime. And David, maybe he's thinking, ah, ha, ha, who did that? And then round he goes as well.
So maybe the track a bit slippery at the moment. People saying there, you can see Jordan replying that the track is dusty and greasy at the moment. And it does seem to be catching out a number of drivers, including a 5-time world champion. Coulthard has never won here at Hockenheim in the past, although he was on pole a couple of years ago. It was a wet, drying session, and Coulthard took the top spot. But other than that, he's had quite a few podium finishes. Had a 1-2 with his teammate Mika Häkkinen, winning in 1998, finished second on that occasion. And in 1995 as well, David Coulthard finished second here. I wonder if the new track might give him a new opportunity. But of course, to do that, they're going to have to beat the Ferraris, and that's going to be a tall order looking at the times that are being recorded this afternoon. Now, let's just watch Michael. This is part of the revision to the track. Now he's going to rejoin the old track very briefly. Well, not very briefly, for a little bit now, because he comes into the stadium. This is the corner coming up where Villeneuve went off a moment ago.
And Michael Schumacher, quickest of all through that second sector. You can see the difference is marginally down in Barrichello. And Barrichello also on a lap, improving a personal best in that first sector. But turn 1, turn 2 in particular, being the corner where most, and Michael again misses the entry into the Sud curve, just gets it slightly wrong on the entry, runs wide, but he goes, well, he still remains second quickest, but lost, well, the best part of 3/10 is Jenson Button now.
No, it's Trulli, yeah, it's
down in the Sachs curve.
Lost it at the Sachs curve. Now, he's found one of the few gravel traps, John, that still exist here, and because he's found the gravel trap, he's now got stuck. So it's a bit unfortunate for the Italian, isn't it? Not quite according to plan there. That wasn't the place to spin. If you're going to spin, you've got to go off where they've got the extra tarmac. Let's take a little look here. Sideways, sideways, sideways. Wind on the opposite lock. Nothing happening. Round she goes into the gravel trap. Try and keep it rolling out of the gravel trap. Tries to keep it going. If it could have just gone a bit further and then gone backwards, he might have been able to get out, but it didn't work.
Another 3 feet and he would have had the tyres on a hard surface, and he could have been able to... I mean, there is a reverse gear in the gearbox somewhere. He may have been able to select it, not ideally reversing back into the flow of traffic. So once again, we've seen now 2 drivers out. Jarno Trulli the second, Alex Jung the first.
Mika Salo on track now in the Toyota, currently 16th fastest, but he's got a good sector time going, as has Alan McNish. McNish a little further up, putting in a very good lap at the moment, and we'll try and keep an eye on what his time is. In fact, McNish is behind Salo on track. We've got another yellow. That's just because of Trulli's car, remember, off at the Sachs curve.
And of course, it's important that Salo and anybody else coming through that section of track with the yellow lights not to go too quick. We saw Harold Frentzen doing that this morning. Mika Salo comes through and he improves up to 9th place. But McNish likewise on a very good lap, and McNish is actually quicker than Mika Salo. So expect to see McNish improve on Salo's 9th place as you watch McNish.
Yeah, coming out of the final corner now is Alan McNish, and this should move him up from the current 14th place. Let's see where this puts him, up to 5th. Well, that's a good effort.
Indeed it is. McNish running behind Barrichello as we watch Jacques Villeneuve this time gets through the lap. This is coming back down now, and the turn straight into the corner where he got all squirrely. He runs a lot of curb entering the corner. This time a better exit, much tidier. Tons and tons of downforce as the speed drops off with the force of the braking capacity, braking power, and then you're turning in with a very lightly loaded car and relying on the mechanical side of the car, and that may not be set up as softly as, for example, somewhere like Hungary, the next Grand Prix, where the car set up spring-wise is probably not dissimilar to that of Monte Carlo.
Well, there was evidence again of how slippery it is out there. Look at that. He's all over the place, Jenson Button, recorrecting the car, and he's quite slow on that lap. The Renaults at the moment, have to say, are struggling a little bit for pace. Jarno Trulli, we know, is off the track, but he was 16th fastest before that. Button's down in 19th.
Well, what's our friend Felipe Massa been up to? There's got to be excitement somewhere when he's on the grass again. But he doesn't mind whether he's on the grass, the tarmac, or whatever.
Doesn't seem to affect him too much. He continues on around, and the two Ferrari, their dominance at the top, although Coulthard and Raikkonen showing well for McLaren Mercedes once again. McNish now up to 5th. Panis is in 6th place. Then it's Heidfeld 7th, Ralf Schumacher 8th, Mika Sato 9th, and Juan Pablo Montoya rounding out the top 10. Then it is Massa, Sato, Villeneuve is currently 13th, Fisichella 14th, ahead of Frentzen, Trulli, Irvine, Bernoldi, Button, De La Rosa. Still his car in the pit, of course. Engine change taking place, but I don't know whether they will get him back out in time. Then it's Mark Webber and Alex Young, who, as we know, has finished his running for the day, having gone off down at turn 2.
So for Toyota, they must have enjoyed that momentary glimpse into the middle of the top 10, now dropping back. Salo back in 9th, but McNish still handsomely placed as 5th quickest.
Oh, look at that, Massa right on the grass coming out in the last corner. I'm glad we're not the ones who still call them Benettons by accident sometimes. Mika Salo referring to the Renault of Jarno Trulli, I think, at that point.
Well, there is one of the BARs, and that's Olivier Panis again up at turn 2.
Now, the way he's pulled off, John, looks like he might have a mechanical failure in exactly the same place that Villeneuve had some sort of mechanical problem in the first session.
Are you still running? Not possible. I tried to put first gear, nothing happened, and the clutch broken or something. So you have tried all the gears, yes? Yes. 10-4.
There's a problem they've suffered from in the past.
Yeah, great shame that for Panis. So having completed the most laps in the first session, he's out. Look at this. Oh, what about that from Takuma Sato?
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. If you let a tail of a car drift out like that, Sato did a stunning job controlling it, but if it takes a bite, it'll scoot sharp right. And there's not much room between the racetrack and that barrier on the inside. And I think there should be a tower wall. If it isn't there, and I haven't seen it placed down there, because if you had an impact, similar speed, maybe thinking about what happened to Fisichella and Nikur, he went into the tire barrier and he had quite a big old rattle around in the car.
So disappointing for Olivier Panis, who was one of the stars of that first session, and now he's not going to be able to keep up as the track gets more grip and people go faster and faster. Nick Heidfeld using the road well. That was neat and tidy, using just about the right amount of extra track. Still a little bit down on times, using a used set of tyres at the moment, no doubt, for 7th fastest, and the yellow still waving for that car of Olivier Panis, which is being tended to down here at turn 2.
In the meantime, Olivier Panis, Pedro de la Rosa finally getting the opportunity. With some 39.5 minutes remaining in this 1-hour session, so Pedro will be out within 5 minutes. and getting down to a few more laps with only 9 so far on the lap board. A lot of work to catch up. Eddie Irvine's completed 23 laps. He's also in the pits. But Heidfeld, well, is that a line, or is that a new version of the line round the hairpin bend?
I think he got himself a bit crossed up there, coming in under braking, and was forced out a little bit wide. Let's watch and ride with him here for a moment. That's a tricky little corner, isn't it? They don't slow much for the right-hand part. A little bit of understeer by the look of it in the middle.
And then also you feel they want to take it flat out, but they haven't quite got the confidence or the grip or the handling of the car to do it.
Maybe one to listen out for in qualifying to see if anybody can actually get flat out through there.
Well, there's the reason why in the hairpin for Nick Heidfeld, he went the long way around. At least he's learned something, and that's important in these sessions. Remember, it doesn't count for good position. It's all about learning, information gathering, and Nick certainly will have learned something, and hopefully he's gathered it up as well.
Coulthard ready to come back out. He moved up to third on his previous run, having cured the problems they had from the first session. Ralf Schumacher has just gone out of the pits as well. So Nick Heidfeld we saw on track. Here comes Coulthard then. So at the moment we've got 5 cars on track. That will be 6 as the Scotsman joins in. But Olivier Panis, remember, his car stranded out there at turn 2. A little bit of a launch control start here for the McLaren.
Well, there's what technology can do for a racing driver. It makes him look good, doesn't it? Not the merest hint of wheel spin. Well, wheel spinning, just going to say, just you're talking about Olivier Panis, he stopped, of course, but teammate Jacques Villeneuve, he's now 9th quickest in the second of the BARs.
I wonder sometimes about whether David actually likes the whole thing of launch control, because he was always one of the best at getting off the line, wasn't he? He often made up places at the start and into the first corner. And nowadays with launch control, you're purely dependent on the electronics to be able to do that.
Well, David is a driver, an intuitive driver, relies on instincts, reactions, feel, feedback. And with traction control and certainly launch control, you're really relying very much on the technology. And I think drivers of David's generation, I mean, sort of not far away from my generation for that matter, is it? Would rely and like the feel of what the human being does to drive a racing car, rather than having so much computing and control that is directly beyond the direct control of the driver.
Well, his teammate here, Kimi Räikkönen, giving us a good little display of the track from that wing-mounted front camera on his car. Still very overcast here today. The weather forecast, as we've heard from one or two others, is for it to brighten up as we go through the weekend. A little bit of a chance of rain tomorrow, but I think it is warming up, and certainly Sunday the forecast is looking pretty good.
Well, I mean, I would say right now conditions are pretty much ideal. It's 24 degrees in the track. Maybe you could raise that a couple of degrees, but the ambience are very comfortable, 20 degrees, 57% humidity. The air is still fairly heavy, but it's not far away from the average you get in most racetracks around the world these days.
Of course, it can be blisteringly hot, can't it here, John? Sometimes we've seen the Hockenheim track in very, very high temperatures, and this sort of central part of Germany, there can be no breath of air sometimes.
I mean, this part of Germany, central southern Germany, really southern Germany, a bit like being based somewhere around Oxford in the UK in relation to the south coast. So it does get pretty hot, and it has been exceptionally hot. But then about a week ago it was miserable, it was wet, windy, horrible weather, and now it looks like it's recovering to going to be a great weekend for Sunday's Grand Prix.
So let's just take a view with Ralf Schumacher here, and currently he's setting a better pace. He's 8th at the moment, but these last couple of corners should see him improve. 16.2 the target time. I don't think he's going to be that, but it should be all right. There's one of the McLarens going wide again. It is David Coulthard, same corner, turn 12.
Well, that's my bogey corner, David Coulthard. And maybe he did rely too much on traction control. Switch the thing off, David. Just trust your senses. Trust the seat of your pants, because that's what makes a good racing driver. In the meantime, Ralf has jumped up to 4th place. He's directly behind David Coulthard, but 0.2 of a second slower than the Scotsman.
So Williams versus McLaren. It could be that tussle again between the two of them. Coulthard continues down through turn 1. And on track, Eddie Irvine. He is down in 18th place, but again, another better lap coming up from him here. Some green numbers coming up on the data screen indicating personal bests. And where does this put Irvine? Up to 15th. Well, not a lot to write home about, but a slight improvement.
Well, let's say that what we saw in Manicourt, that delighted 9th place from Eddie Irvine in the grid, maybe more realistically, Irvine running about 15th, 16th, but David got it way, way wrong. And again runs right over the curb, over the grass, into the gravel trap, back onto the grass again. Here's the view of it. Doesn't appear to be doing anything wrong. Entering the corner. Watch from the back end. There's the hand goes up. Whee! Well, I think he may have done what we've seen Villeneuve do, is clipping that curb on the inside, and it's enough to throw the car off the track.
What interests me, John, watching these pictures,
Well, he's just exiting the corner far too early. That was the problem.
Why are we seeing in this particular corner the fact that they're going so wide off when they go like this? It's not just look, I mean, he was more than a car's full width across the track as he went off, and normally when we see them go off they might run, you know, a bit wide, but it seems to be they're going a lot wider here.
It's always been a corner that you tend to sort of nip into a bit early. You don't take a very acute line into it, you sort of edge your way into it, get the apex. But as David mentioned earlier, the exit speeds are much higher now than they were in previous years on parts of the track, which of course are the old parts of the track, and they're just running out of track. But I think David ran out of road before he ran. He was too quick too early in the exit of the corner.
Well, Jenson Button now trying to improve. He's way down in 19th place at the moment, and even allowing for a heavy tank of fuel in the car this session so far. He's still a long way down the order, so we'll expect to see hopefully some improvements for Jenson Button. Bernoldi's moved up slightly. He's up to 13th place. His teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen is currently 17th, and Jenson Button, well, he's not going to improve that much, as you can see on the second split. He might move him up from his 19th place, but he's not going to be challenging the top two. Now, we saw Alex Young's car stranded a little while ago down at turn 2, and he's out of the session. Let's just see where Button finishes off this lap first of all, and see if this improves him from 19th place, just about to come across the line. Across the line he goes, and it brings, no, it stays in 19th place. Bruce Jones has managed to catch up with Alex Young.
Alex Young, a very strong first session from you, but then you appeared to get caught out at turn 2, but it does appear to be a very tricky corner. A lot of people having trouble there.
Well, it's a bit strange, but it seems a bit slipperier than it was earlier on. Around the whole track, really, not just turn 2. And yeah, the first session went really well for us, and we did a lot of changes to the car for the second session. I think it would have been a lot better as well. And just gutted that we got stuck on the curb, you know, but that's the way it is, and we'll have to work on it for tomorrow.
But what do you make of the new track? Do you like it, or would you prefer to have been racing on the old style Hockenheim with the long straights?
I think everyone here preferred to be on the old one. The old one was quite special, but you know, the new one is not as bad as it seemed. You know, when I walked around it yesterday, I thought it's going to be a car park sort of a circuit, but it's not so bad, and I think it'll be all right, and hopefully there'll be quite a bit of overtaking in the race.
Best of luck, thanks for talking.
So Alex Young actually coming off his second best result of the season, that 10th place in Manicourt last week, boosting his confidence, but going out of this session. We're watching Barrichello. He's fastest overall, but Michael Schumacher behind him on track has just set the fastest mid-sector time. The Ferraris are on the attack again.
Well, Michael Schumacher, we saw at the end, just coming up to the end of the first session, he had put more rear wing on the Ferrari. And here we ride on board, and Michael using the curbing. This is in the Sud curve now, so will this see him back at the top? Will he break into the 115s? No, he doesn't. He stays second place as well, but much closer, well, relatively, to his teammates.
Still seem to be losing a bit of grip just through those last two right-handers.
Oh, Montoya! I tell you, how long is it going to be? How long is it going to be before we have a major incident down in the Ajip curve?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think somebody's going to hit that wall on the right-hand side very hard at some point, but he is on a quick lap here, John.
Well, look what he's doing also. He's running very wide to give himself maximum exit speed. Not necessarily for this lap, but certainly it will help him in future laps. He does improve overall. He improves up to 6th place, 2 behind his teammate. Let's look again and see what goes on.
This was the previous corner to that. This was out of turn 11, and in fact, look at how much road he was using there.
Well, that is not meant to be, and again, that'll be noted by race director Charlie Whiting, and I'm sure in the driver's briefing, if not earlier, Juan Pablo Montoya maybe singled out and asked either what he's doing. But there, look, I mean, the car, I mean, he's almost head on, and there isn't, I can see, any tyre barrier down that wall.
Well, he's certainly experimenting and boldly going, where not everybody has gone so far in this session as they learn the new track and try and work out what they can and what they can't get away with. Coulthard currently 3rd fastest, remember, and we've got an opportunity now to speak to David Coulthard's team boss, Ron Dennis. Ron, welcome to our free practice broadcast, and We've obviously heard about the announcements that you've made today already on the driver lineup. Can you just reconfirm that to our F1 Digital viewers?
Yes, no problem. Good morning to you. Well, as I said in our short press conference, we've, after much deliberation, taken the decision to contract yet again 3 drivers for the team. There's those amongst us that will consider that Alexander is merely a test driver, but in fact we are contracting 3 race drivers and intending to intensify our testing efforts.
How long are all the drivers contracted for the next few years? Can you tell us that?
Well, the simple answer is no.
Right.
But to be more elaborate, we tend to work as long as possible with drivers. We believe in continuity. It gives us the ability to understand the driver very, very well. He learns the team, and normally if a driver's able to win, able to perform, then in that situation you're really better staying with what you have.
Ron, what's the situation with Mika Hakkinen as well? Do we have confirmation that he's definitely not coming back? Is there any more news?
It's quite right. We announced, or should I say, Mika announced his retirement by way of a short video that I think is available to you, or should be shortly. And in the video, he tends to explain exactly how he'd approach the whole process. I think the mid-2001 season, the Monaco period, when we spoke about it, the decision that we took then, A, took away pressure from him, and it allowed him to really race the balance of the season, and B, put us in a position where we could consider very carefully which driver we wanted to put in the car for 2002 without the normal pressures of all the teams reacting to our approaches. So the outcome, I think, and the way we did it was very much in the interest of both Mika and ourselves.
Well, he's been a very special part of your team over the years, thank you very much for joining us. Busy time for you. We'll let you get back to your activities on the pit wall. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to Ron for that information. We're none the wiser as to how long the drivers are going to be contracted, in particular David Coulthard. But Kimi Räikkönen, no doubt, is on that long, I believe, a 5-year deal. That was something that was concluded before the start of this season. Räikkönen very quick in that first sector, waiting to see second sector times. It's slightly slower, but it's going to see, I would think, Räikkönen move up, certainly ahead of Ralf Schumacher, and even might put him into the territory David Coulthard is currently in, and that's 3rd place.
Yes, this is looking like a good lap once again from the Finn. Let's see where it puts him. He's just got these last 2 right-handers. Gets a nice tight apex. That's where Michael's been running a bit wide on the last couple of attempts through here. Cross the line, 3rd fastest. Look at how close he is. He's just a few thousandths really behind the time set by both Schumacher and Barrichello.
Yeah, strong run from Kimi Räikkönen, and again a good exit out of the Nord curve up to turn 2. The corner we've seen quite a lot of incident in. Well, into the first sector, it's just his most recent time is on display, not quite as quick as in previous ones.
Repairs to those damaged barge boards on Coulthard's car after his run wide. Frentzen here, we're looking at 17th fastest, mid-sector, good improvement for him. So this could be, again, seeing him leap up the time sheet slightly. Frentzen's currently in 17th place. Where will this put him as he crosses the line? Up to 12th, so that's a good effort from him. Teammate Bernaldi, 14th.
So I think the Arrows team, like Jordan's and the Sauber, benefiting from the Bridgestone tyre, which appears to enjoy a slight advantage, particularly in the first session and midway through the second. But Räikkönen and Coulthard, Ralf Schumacher, Montoya, 3rd through 6th quickest on the Michelin. But probably even more noticeable is that Alan McNish in the Toyota, also on Michelin, is 7th behind those top 3 teams. And Olivier Panis still in 8th, in fact, despite him having stopped some time ago.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix, isn't it, John, between the Michelin runners and what we've got. I mean, McNish, as you say, up in 7th, and yet if you look down at 18th place, Irvine now up to 9th. That's a good effort. So Eddie Irvine up to 9th. Let's just see if De La Rosa is going to go on to a quicker lap here. Currently, as you see, down into 18th place. I was just going to mention that De La Rosa himself is with Trulli and Button down in 18th, 19th and 20th places on their Michelin tyres.
Well, Pedro on his 15th lap, he had only 9, I think, or 6 laps even in that first session, and he's literally by every sector will improve, playing catch up to his teammate and also to the rest of the field. As again, Felipe Massa currently in 12th, just improved to 1:17.998, continues and again goes off track.
Massa, yes, a little bit wide once again. Michael Schumacher's on a good lap. First sector for Michael Schumacher looking good. Just makes me wonder, looking at these Michelin tyres, as to whether there is a more marked difference between the two compounds they've got here this weekend, and maybe some teams are on one and not performing that well, and others using the other compound and much quicker, so maybe there is a more distinct difference between them here.
Oh, Michael, well, he certainly rushed into that very tight left-hand corner, balancing the throttle on the car much better on the exit back onto that return straight. But 36.069 was that sector time, and as Jordan, as that Sato, I think it is.
Yep.
So down at the hairpin bend, leaping him from Ferrari to Jordan's and back again. So we wait to see Michael conclude the lap. Traffic, unfortunately, ahead of him. So I think that might be Villeneuve in the VAR. But Michael, again, probably losing momentum in that second sector. Can he pick it up on the third? Stays second on a 1:16.8.
Yeah, it's about 6/10 off his best so far, which is almost exactly the same time that Barrichello's done. Coming down behind Villeneuve here. And Villeneuve's car, you can see moving around, sliding around quite a lot.
I think this is the first time we've seen two cars at competitive speed coming down into the hairpin bend when we did have it. And I want to see just quite how Michael, if he can get the job done or not, into that hairpin bend as we go back to Takuma Sato, currently 16th. That Michael Schumacher incident with Villeneuve, well, actually the pass was on Skytrack 6, I beg your pardon. So Michael got past without any trouble. And Felipe Massa now travelling once again off track on the grass. And what is this young man up to?
Well, let's see. This was Sato a moment ago. We saw him get into trouble earlier on here today. This time a slightly different line into the hairpin, but once again out-braking himself, carrying too much speed in, and having to go over the Bridgestone sign with his Bridgestone tyres before being able to rejoin the track once again. This was Bernoldi coming into the same area, and I'm not too sure that wasn't... no, it wasn't. That was into turn 2, actually.
Turn 2 again.
Turn 2, yeah.
Turn 2 really is causing the biggest problem under braking, but the Air-Jeep curve coming back into the stadium where we see Felipe Massa, that's been causing the biggest trouble for drivers exiting the corner too soon and finding themselves riding the curb and then getting an attitude in the car which is putting them into danger, into shooting sharp right into the wall. So Felipe Massa's pretty much, I think, been off every corner around the track. At least he's found the limits probably quicker than anybody else has, but nevertheless maybe over driving. But never, in fairness, he's gone 7th quickest on his last lap, 1:17.361. So all that exuberance has paid dividends in the end. Yep,
so good improvement there for the Brazilian. And that keeps him a few places ahead of his teammate. Massa's now 7th and Heidfeld down in 13th place. Just looking at the speed trap figures, which the speed trap is just around here, actually. It's just on the rundown, just after that curve towards the hairpin. Michael Schumacher's gone slightly faster on the speed trap in this second session, up to 324 kilometers per hour. So, again, just slightly over that 200 miles an hour mark. Montoya and Raikkonen are next up behind the two Ferraris, and then it's Ralf Schumacher, and then it's Nick Heidfeld. So earlier we had the Saubers right behind the Ferraris, but now we've got the BMW and Mercedes-powered cars right up there with Ferrari across the speed trap.
Yes, it's pretty even in terms of top speeds, but of course come qualifying, well, we may see even more downforce being strapped on to the cars to try and drag a little bit of extra lap time. Of course, in the race, they may want to find a place to pass, and that's going to be a passing opportunity into the first of that hairpin bend. Well, you don't want to put too much downforce on because you'll make yourself vulnerable to everybody else around you.
Michael Schumacher did slightly improve his time on that last lap. He's just been round, 37th lap that he's completed, but again it was just a 100th outside the time that Rubens Barrichello had set earlier on. So the Ferrari's very, very evenly matched. Raikkonen only a 10th of a second behind them in third in the McLaren. Coulthard fourth. This man, Ralf Schumacher, 5th ahead of Montoya. Then Massa, McNish still up there in the top 10. He's 8th fastest. Panis 9th, but remember, not able to complete any more laps, so his time gradually being squeezed out. Bernoldi's up to 10th place. Good effort that from Enrique Bernoldi in the Arrows. They didn't run much in Manicure, but here at Hockenheim, the Arrows car seems to be working well.
Well, I think it's just confirmation of what a good little car the Arrows has been. Just needs development, budget, and time, and Benson and Bernoldi really most occasions drag the best out of it. Occasionally do get it all wrong, as Michael once again just tests out the limits of the pit lane. There's the white line, 60 kilometers today and tomorrow morning, and then of course for qualifying up to 80 kilometers per hour. Interestingly, both Ferraris completed identical number of laps, both on 37 laps. So Michael deciding he wants the car to be pushed back into the garage, where they will then continue the process of change, alteration. And well, we've got just under the 20 minutes, 19 in fact, before this session ends. The work of determining which tyre they think they may prefer will continue, and at some point towards the end of the session, I would anticipate the front of the field getting into the 115s at least, if they strap on a new set of rubber.
Eddie Irvine, let's see what he can achieve now. Currently in 12th position.
You could just watch Eddie going in, you could see he was very, very careful about the entry, didn't take a big fistful of lock, waited until he had got the confidence, then he turned the car quite abruptly.
This is the high-speed section, 200 miles an hour, into the hairpin. Amazing, isn't it, from 200 miles an hour coming down to only about 40 miles an hour, and it's such a short braking distance.
Well, he's braking probably just under the 100 meters, and you know, that is pretty awesome braking. It'll be interesting to see how the 67-lap Grand Prix does in terms of driver fatigue, because in that interview a little earlier with Mika Salo, or the radio traffic between Pitts and Salo sounded to me like he was blowing a bit, you know, puffing. So maybe the work rate here is actually quite high, certainly miles higher than on the previous layout that we have so accustomed to.
Let's just watch the rest of this lap. It's a good one from Irvine. Could well be on a bit less fuel on this lap. Let's see where it puts him. Up to 7, so good improvement for Irvine, now into the top 7. Puts him ahead of Massa and McNish and Olivier Panis, who's now pushed down to 10th.
Yes, that might have been an oily rag, because Eddie Irvine jumped massively up to 7th place. Of course, we've seen Jaguar do this on occasions in the past, and then when it comes to the session that matters, the qualifying session, not able to sustain the pace we see on Friday. McNish, good exit out of the final turn. Well, some 3 seconds down now.
Yeah, he stays 9th, so he still has a good time from earlier on presumably a slightly more fresh set of rubber. 40 laps he's completed now in this 2 free practice sessions, and that's just a little bit behind Jacques Villeneuve, who's now done more laps than anybody else. 42 laps completed by the Canadian in the BAR Honda, as work continues down there in the Ferrari pit. Looking like a little bit of a change to the barge boards on the side of the car.
Well, they've got all the aerodynamic devices, they just simply bolt them on, they don't adjust them any longer, because, as we mentioned in the Manicourt broadcast, that it's lighter to change the component than have something that is an adjustable component. And every little, you know, gram or even whatever smaller measurements are these days, all adds up at the end of the day. And Montoya coming through the Ajip curve again, runs wide, kicks up the dust, not as spectacular as we saw earlier in the session, but again just illustrating how easy it is to overrun the exit of that corner.
So Barrichello still fastest overall in free practice on Friday at the revised Hockenheim track. We're riding once again with David Coulthard. Let's listen. Yeah, that sounded like a little bit of left foot braking going on there.
Yes, he was using his left foot to brake. David, in fact, brakes with both feet, which is a bit of a trick. He uses left foot in certain situations, uses his right foot in other situations, but clearly he had left foot braking going through that exit onto the old circuit.
So we'll see whether this is going to be an improvement for him. I don't think it will be. The lap time, no, this will be going on to a quick lap, because he's just come around a 17.1 through the first sector, 35.8 through the second, so 0.8 down on the best so far, 17.0, but still showing good competitiveness, only about 1/10 of a second slower than his previous best. Looking at Giancarlo Fisichella now, the Italian, hoping to make up for the disappointment of not running last time out in Manicourt. And Fisichella finds himself down in 18th place currently.
Giancarlo Fisichella back behind the wheel of a car after that big shunt that he had in Saturday morning running in Manicourt. Ooh, well, that's going to happen again a lot. Running over the exit curb out of the Nord curve.
Yes, that once again just pushing that a little bit too hard. Ralf Schumacher currently on a reasonable lap, as we see work going on down in the McLaren pit. But they must be reasonably happy with progress so far. Raikkonen still third fastest, remember, just behind those two Ferraris. Montoya, meanwhile, he's sixth fastest. Remember, this weekend he'll be looking for yet another pole position to add to his tally. He's had 5 in a row in the last 5 races. A very impressive run of success it has been. But the record of consecutive poles in one season, at least, belongs to Alain Prost at 7. So he's still got a bit of work to do. That was done back in 1993, and that, of course, was also driving for Williams.
Well, Ralf Schumacher looking quite formidable as he comes through these final 2 cars on to the start-finish straight. Ralf in 5th place on a 17.156, goes 4th.
So Schumacher puts Coulthard down a little bit. That brings Ralf within 0.6 of a second of Kimi Raikkonen. We're watching Nick Heidfeld now in the Sauber, currently down in 15th place and looking to move up the order slightly, having seen his teammate move up to 8th a little while ago.
So again, that final thrust out onto the start-finish straight. Good exit from Heidfeld. Goes 11th.
So Heidfeld making some improvements here. Let's just quickly run through the order. We've got just over 13 minutes to go. Barrichello fastest overall from Michael Schumacher, then it's Kimi Raikkonen, Ralf Schumacher, who we're just taking a look back at Ralf, 4th at the moment, and that was his use of the extra piece of road coming through turn 1.
Yes, and we saw Michael Schumacher try that out in the first session. Ralf does it this time. This time it was clearly just slightly too early on the exit and deciding to use that tarmac to make a recovery.
So Irvine set to come back out. Michael has already completed some 37 laps in this free practice session, these 2 free practice sessions this morning, almost as many as anybody up and down pit lane. So Ferrari making the most of track time here to get a real handle on how to set the car up for this 2.8-mile track, but it's still his teammate who has the faster time. Kimi Raikkonen also awaiting last chance to come out on track, presumably. And we'll just have to see whether he can improve. A little bit of tyre smoke just coming off the front of Pedro de la Rosa's Jaguar. This lap will see him improve after the engine failure he suffered in the free practice. Now trying to put together a lap that will bring him up from current 18th place. Well, it doesn't, unfortunately. He stays there.
Well, it can all go wrong in that last sector of the circuit. Nevertheless, Pedro de la Rosa having a difficult Friday here at Hockenheim as David Coulthard's car continues this repair. We saw him go off and did a fair bit of damage around the... This is back on track now. Whose car was that in the pits then?
That's Kimi. I think they're still working on Kimi's car. Coulthard now heading back into the pits and making his way in as he is in 5th place at the moment. I think be reasonably satisfied with the work done by the team, but so far so good for this man, Rubens Barrichello, winner of Grand Prix here back in 2000, his first ever Grand Prix victory in trying circumstances as well. If you remember, he qualified down in 18th place. It was a tricky, damp qualifying session, didn't work out well for him at all, but to win the Grand Prix from 18th place, and particularly withstanding the pressure in the final laps, they were going to bring him in and put him onto wets, but he was putting in such decent lap times. Ross Brawn said to him, nope, stay out there, you're doing a fine job, and Rubens certainly earned that first Grand Prix victory.
Yes, took a long time for the next one to come, but nonetheless Rubens, well, he's playing second fiddle, unfortunately for him, but he's in the car that's going to give him the best chance to win Grand Prix. And now, with the championship for Michael being sewn up, there will be other occasions, and I've no doubt that what we saw in Austria will be repaid back in tons by Michael Schumacher to his teammate. Certainly to get him back up into second place in the championship, but most of all to make sure that Ferrari also maximise their point-scoring possibilities in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Just over 10 minutes to go then, and then it'll be a fairly long evening, I should think, of calculations and work going on between the engineers to discover what they've learnt. They will have generated a huge amount of data from today, and it's a question of pouring through all that data, trying to work out where they can gain time, where they're losing time at the moment. And for all the engineers, quite a fun challenge, I should think, for them to really get to grips with this circuit. When it comes to qualifying tomorrow, we'll get the idea of to who has solved the conundrums best. Eddie Irvine here Is he going to improve again? He's 7th fastest at the moment, remember? And yes, he gains another position, in fact. So another good effort from Irvine.
It sounds like maybe Jaguar are opting or trying the softer of the two tyres. Michelin, of course, said they've got a brand new tyre, which is the result of what they found from the Manucourt. Whoa, goodness me, Sato.
Yeah, managed to hold it just about.
Well, I don't know how many times you can get away with that, but he seems to have cat-like instincts this weekend to date.
Yeah, and this was just both of them coming into the pits. That all seemed a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, a bit untidy, and I think one was maybe blaming the other, and a little bit of payback there between the Jordan. Oh, and
Ralph again, that's his favourite place, isn't it? Or is that, I think that looks like turn 2 again.
It is.
He's been off there a number of occasions already today, but he's back on track, doesn't leave it stranded as Alex Young did. He's been under a bit of attack, not attack, but Frank Williams has been quoted in the press this week, hasn't he? Yeah, just criticising Ralph a little bit, saying he needs to up his game somewhat.
Yes, I think the Williams team are feeling that while Montoya's doing a great job in terms of qualifying and racing very well, that Ralph, maybe the word sullen seems to sort of creep into their vocabulary, and they're just reminding him that they're paying a lot of money for him to sign him on a longish-term contract in the middle of last year, and you know, we're looking for results.
Well, we'll have to see just what Ralph can do this weekend. He won here last year. There's still a lot of work going on in Raikkonen's car, and messing around with the seat, doing all sorts of bits and pieces. I don't know what the problem has been, but it certainly is an unexpected issue that they've been dealing with, and now they're just hoping to be able to get him out in this last 8 minutes of the session.
Well, Raikkonen's still not in the car as the team frantically get the seat attached, get all the belts sorted out, pop them in as they go back to Michael Schumacher. Well, he's just beginning, he's just done an out lap. This is the beginning of a flying lap for the 5 times world champion.
Seems funny, doesn't it, having to get used to saying that, as he is now 5 times world champion.
Well, let's practice saying 6 times world champion, because that might be even more difficult. Certainly would make the rest of the field feel very unhappy indeed.
Yeah, well,
look at that, fastest purple in that first sector by over 1/10 of a second.
Yep, so, and a good speed trap figures again, is it? Well, no, not quite so much, so perhaps they have cranked on a little bit more downforce once again. 324 his previous best, and as ever, he's getting huge amount of support everywhere around the track. Michael Schumacher could be set to take the fastest time here. Just watch his line, see how much he's learnt, see whether he's doing anything different to the other drivers, all learning the track at the same time. And he's coming up to that notorious Ajip curve, turn 12. This is where they've all been making mistakes. Michael Schumacher goes wide, but just right, doesn't go too wide.
That was just about wheel perfect. And I mean, Schumacher, should have seen the second split sector time, not that impressive in fact. So now, can he pick up any remaining time available to him as he comes through the Sud curve, out onto the pit straight, runs wide, car gives a bit of a flick but straightens it up. Well, it goes quickest by just under that 0.2 of a second.
So he goes faster than his teammate, and a lot of that was on the first sector. It was a very, very quick first sector to the lap. Meanwhile, we ride on board with Juan Pablo Montoya. Across the line he comes. He stays down in 7th place on a 1:17.720. That's about 0.6 slower than his previous best. So no improvement as yet. In the Renault pit, they must be feeling a little blue, as well as looking blue, because Button is still down in 19th, and of course Trulli, as we know, his car went off and is stranded over at the Sachs curve, so there's no improvement for Trulli coming, and Button still down in 19th. And I have to say, for me, that's probably the surprise of this session so far, to see Renault so far down. I'm sure that we'll expect better things in qualifying. Frentzen here in the Arrows.
Look at that, only 94 hundredths away, so Frentzen clearly going to see an improvement. Frentzen currently in 12th place. So I want to see what happens when they'll go back to the pit and exit. Very interesting and all that, but let's see what Frentzen's doing.
Here we go. We'll see if this makes it better for him. 10th place for the Arrows driver, a 17.471, and he's right with his teammate. In fact, they're 10th and 11th.
And the braking and the pickup of the throttle into turn 1 is really short now. Again, going into a qualifying context, that is going to be a corner where somebody's going to do what we heard David Coulthard doing, not actually lift off the throttle, just use left foot braking in an attempt to try and maximise exit speed.
That's a front spring that's going in there. That's a torsion bar front spring that they use on the Jaguar. You might wonder why it doesn't look like a normal coil spring. Well, they use torsion bars on the Jag, so that you could see a change of spring going on the front end of the Jaguar.
So Heinz-Harald Frentzen continues around, having just achieved 10th fastest time. He's given a personal best in first sector, so there'll be a further quicker lap. Again, just balancing the car, not quite using left foot braking, just breathing the throttle. Again, not a personal best in second sector. That seems to be the weaker area for Frentzen and the arrows as he comes down into the Sachs curve. Unfortunately for him, he gets a little bit delayed, and he's just backed out of it.
Yeah, no point in continuing.
For another lap. There's only 4 minutes left, so there's little we can do. Cool it for another lap and then go again.
So they're clear instructions. Graham Taylor on the radio telling him to just cool it and then pick it up again. No point in coming back into the pits. There would not be time then to get another flying lap in, so he's going to go fairly steady. You could hear him really backing off there. Cool the tyres off and then put in another charge.
Well, talking about cooling the tyres off, we've got David cool the tyres off, Coulthard. Currently 5th quickest, and David's gone personal best in first sector. Wait to see what he's going to do in second sector.
Let's ride with him a moment.
Again, that left foot braking.
Yep, that was out of turn 11.
Personal best, sector 2.
There, he doesn't go over the gravel this time. Oh, but we've got a Jaguar in trouble. That's still a Rosa.
Turn 2.
Again, turn 2 catches out the unwary, or even those who are fairly wary. It's catching out as well. Coulthard.
Yes, coming through this final, and Jordan off. Well, let's watch Coulthard. Well, that's Fiss, as I can't tell you it is. Well, Coulthard, he improves time, stays 4th quickest, 16.440.
So that brings him within just a 10th of his teammate. That's Fisichella, as you said, getting out of the car. That looks like a mechanical problem for the Italian. He's down in his 16th place, so not a particularly good session for him. Sato, his teammate, 14th. They were in the top 10 at the end of the first session, but they don't seem to have continued the progress.
Meanwhile, Kimi Räikkönen also doing a good job. Here we go on board now. He's been blocked by one of the two Renaults. Well, it's going to be one of the Renaults because it's Jenson Button. John who truly stopped much earlier in the session, and that's unfortunate because that was a potentially improved lap from Räikkönen. Now he's got to start the process all over again, and he's got 2.5 minutes to do it.
Yeah, he's backed off this time. I wonder whether he'll try and do another lap, as we saw Frentzen building up to. But as you say, that was a shame because it did look... He's missing his front wing, John. The right-hand side of Massa's front wing is not there.
Yeah, you're right. I saw the left side flickering up and down, and by the time we got to the right one, you'd spotted it. So Massa finally has managed to drag bits, and he's got something stuck under the car. It's the wing, the wing. Yeah, well, that's not much fun because that could cause him a fairly big problem. But anybody behind, if that spits itself out of the rear of the Sauber, you wouldn't want to run over that doing 200 miles an hour.
Fisichella out of his car. Let's see if we can spot what happened. This was Massa. What sort of a line was that?
Well, I think he knocked it off coming out of turn 1, and he got to turn 2 and realised he had no front downforce.
Yeah, that must have been on. That was Fisichella blowing up. Now, there might have been oil down, so maybe a combination of circumstances. Perhaps Massa ran wide on his oil, then damaged the wing.
I would think that was the most probable reason. Let's go back and look at Pedro de la Rosa.
So it's certainly slippery down there.
Well, that's turn 2. You know, we've seen all the Fisichella went off in turn 1, so there's no oil down there. That's just simply down to a misjudgment on the ball. There's oil and warning flags to drivers, and that's in turn 1. Fisichella's Honda engine dumped its oil on the track, and I think Felipe Massa was the first car along and just innocently was a victim.
Well, it's all fun and games towards the end of the free practice session. Massa has made it back to the pit lane safely, and he will end this session with the 8th fastest time, unless we see some improvements on this last lap. And of course, we might see 1 or 2 go quick. Although, let me tell you, Frentzen's been and come back into the pit. He hasn't decided to put in another quick lap. But the good news is that both arrows have been running a number of laps. 38 laps completed for Frentzen, 39 laps for Bernoldi. And they've been putting in some good data gathering time on circuit as we see those bits of carbon fibre being retrieved from Massa's car.
Yes, you can see the foam inside the wing, and that's what the shape has formed around.
I hit the Coney, you know, and was completely wet in the first corner, completely wet.
It doesn't know the difference between water and oil by the sounds of things. It could have been actually both, in fairness.
Yes, I think there, that was what he was trying to point out, that it was very slippery down into turn 1, and you can see that line, can't you?
Yes, it's not a very wide line, but there's no doubt residue on either side of it. And with Felipe sitting fairly low in the car, he just would barrel into the corner oblivious and then suddenly wonder why.
Checkered flag out then, so the end of free practice here at Hockenheim, the revised circuit, and Michael Schumacher has just finished it off with not an improvement in time, but the fastest final sector that anybody has set. He didn't string it together with 2 quick earlier sectors, but still ends up the day fastest. It's a Ferrari 1-2. Michael Schumacher on home territory on a track where he has never taken pole and has only won once in the past. Well, it's going well for him at the moment. Faster than his teammate Barrichello by 0.2 of a second, with the McLaren Mercedes behind them, 3rd and 4th. And then the Williams of Ralf Schumacher 5th, the Jaguar of Eddie Irvine 6th fastest. I wonder if that gives Nicky something to smile about. 7th place for Juan Pablo Montoya, Felipe Massa next up in 8th, then McNish 9th, and Heinz-Harald Frenzen's 10th. Then it's Bernoldi, Panis, who went out, of course, in that second session, Heidfeld, Sato, De La Rosa, Fisichella, Villeneuve, Sarlo, Button, and truly well down, Webber and Jung at the back.
Well, like a little glimpse at the left front, and that was one of the 2 Saabers. The Bridgestone giving you an indication of as to where, but also you can see quite a lot of pickup. Oh, now there's bodywork, and whose is that? That looks McLaren-like.
Yes, it does a bit. I wonder whether it was the Sauber front wing, but...
No, the Sauber wing was underneath the car. So looking up on our screen, we can't see...
It might be the other bit of the Sauber. There seem to be several bits of it.
Yes,
I think one bit was underneath.
Yes, it's in turn 1 now. Maybe that's where it all ended up, but certainly been lying in the track for over a lap if that was the case.
So there is the classification from this free practice session on the Friday. Everyone has done plenty of laps to learn the track. No excuses now. And Bridgestone's with Ferrari dominating at the top, but Michelin's getting in there amongst them with Raikkonen, Coulthard, Schumacher, Irvine and Montoya. Felipe Massa putting in another impressive performance on day 1, as he often does at every Grand Prix meeting. McNish will be happy with 9th. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen will be happy just to have done some laps and prove some competitiveness as well with the 10th fastest time, with his teammate Enrique Bernoldi just 1 place behind him. Panis disappointed because he was so good this morning in the first session. He ended up with the 3rd fastest time after the 1 hour, but unfortunately in that 2nd hour the car breaking down on him early on. Nick Heidfeld 13th, then Sato, De La Rosa, Fisichella, Villeneuve, Sarlo, Button and Trulli, and I have to say the Renault's really not performing well at all at the moment. The Minardi's at the back, as we might have expected. Webber's time only a second, less than a second slower than the Renault of Jarno Trulli. But there, Michael Schumacher, he comes to Germany as the 5 times world champion, and he ends the first session as fastest. Let's look back over the free practice.